The day started like any other on the isolated military outpost at the edge of the human frontier. Captain Jackson stood at the edge of the outpost, staring out into the vast uninhabited wilderness. The wind carried the scent of dust and the strange, unyielding heat that always seemed to permeate this part of the galaxy. He felt the familiar tension in the air, the sense that something was about to break. For years, peace had reigned between humans and the alien species that shared this corner of the universe. But that peace had always felt fragile, like a thread, just waiting to snap. Jackson wasn't the type to believe in fate, but even he couldn't shake the feeling that today something big was about to happen. The shrill sound of an alarm ripped through the silence, cutting through his thoughts. A voice blared through the loudspeakers. "Alert! Unidentified vessel approaching. All personnel to your stations." The urgency in the voice sent a wave of adrenaline through his veins. He ran toward the command center, the metallic echo of his boots blending with the chaos unfolding around him. Inside the command center, the crew was already working at full speed. Screens flashed red, showing a rapidly approaching ship, far too large for any known human vessel. Jackson's eyes narrowed. It wasn't a ship they recognized, but its trajectory was unmistakable. It was heading directly toward their outpost. "We need to know who's on that ship now," Jackson barked, his mind racing. His soldiers scrambled to track the vessel's origins, but it was like nothing they had ever seen before. The ship was unlike any alien technology they had ever encountered. It was sleek, almost organic in design, and as it drew closer, a sense of dread grew in Jackson's chest. "Captain, we have a visual," one of the technicians shouted. The screen flickered, and Jackson's breath caught in his throat. The image on the screen was clear now, a figure standing at the helm of the ship, tall and imposing. The figure was unmistakable. It was an alien, but not just any alien. This one had the look of the old enemies, the ones they hadn't heard from in years. A species thought to be extinct after the war decades ago, the Drogians. Jackson's hand gripped the edge of the console. The Drogians were known for their violent, unpredictable nature. The war with them had been one of humanity's darkest times. The thought that one of them was alive and coming to them now was unthinkable. But the truth was there on the screen in front of him. A Drogian had returned. "Prepare the defense systems," Jackson ordered, his voice sharp. "We won't go down without a fight." As the crew scrambled to ready the outpost's weapons, Jackson turned to the screen again, trying to make sense of the situation. The Drogian ship hovered just above the ground, its engines humming low, sending vibrations through the air. Jackson knew he had little time. The alien would land soon, and they would have to face whatever it was planning. Suddenly, the ship's hatch opened, and the figure descended. There was no mistaking it. This was no ordinary soldier. This was a Drogian leader, someone powerful. Jackson's heart skipped a beat as the alien figure's face became visible, but then something unusual happened. The Drogian didn't attack. Instead, it seemed to hesitate, scanning the surroundings as if searching for something. The air crackled with tension. Jackson's soldiers had their fingers on triggers, ready to open fire, but something stopped them. The alien's gaze fell directly on Jackson, and for a moment, the two stared at each other. A strange recognition flickered in the alien's eyes. It was as if this Drogian knew Jackson from somewhere. Then, to everyone's shock, the alien spoke. And its words were not what anyone expected. "Jackson," the alien said, its voice low and haunting. "It's been a long time." The name echoed in Jackson's mind, and a chill ran down his spine. He didn't recognize the alien, but the voice, there was something about it that felt familiar. The air seemed to grow colder, and the sound of his own heartbeat pounded in his ears. The alien took another step forward, and Jackson instinctively took a step back. "Who are you?" he demanded, trying to steady his voice. "What do you want?" The alien's lips curled into a slight smile, one that didn't reach its eyes. "You've forgotten, haven't you?" It said softly. "I never did." Jackson's pulse quickened. The tension in the air was unbearable. The words were clear. This wasn't just any alien. This was someone from his past. Someone he had known, perhaps even fought against, during the war. His mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. Who was this alien? And why was it here now? Before he could say another word, the alien continued, "I'm here for something far more important than war." And in that moment, Jackson realized this encounter was far from what he had imagined. What was to come would change everything. Asterisk. The tension in the air thickened as Jackson stood frozen, his mind struggling to process the words coming from the alien. His soldiers shifted uneasily behind him, their weapons still trained on the figure, unsure of what to do next. Jackson's eyes remained locked with the alien's, the strange feeling in his gut growing stronger. He didn't recognize the alien, not in any meaningful way, yet something about its presence felt deeply personal. There was a history here that he couldn't recall. The Drogian spoke again, its voice carrying an eerie calmness. "You remember me now, don't you, Jackson?" it asked. The question wasn't just a simple inquiry, it was a challenge. A reminder that something was buried deep in Jackson's past, a piece of history he had locked away. Jackson shook his head slightly, trying to shake off the creeping unease. "I don't know who you are," he replied, his voice low but firm. "And I don't know what you want, but you're not welcome here." A flicker of amusement danced in the alien's eyes, but there was no anger in its expression. It seemed almost as though it was studying Jackson, as if it were waiting for him to remember something that was slipping just beyond his grasp. "You never forget," the alien said cryptically. "It's just a matter of time before it all comes back to you." Jackson's mind raced, trying to make sense of the words. He could feel the weight of something heavy pressing on him, an invisible force pulling at the corners of his memory. The alien's words felt like a key to something long hidden, something that Jackson didn't want to remember. But he knew, deep down, that whatever it was important. And now, whatever was buried in his past was coming back to haunt him. "Who are you?" Jackson demanded again, stepping forward, his voice sharper this time. He could hear the uncertainty in his own tone, but he couldn't afford to show weakness now. The alien remained calm, unfazed by Jackson's growing anger. "You were there," it said, its voice quiet yet full of meaning. "We fought together against the Drogian invasion." A flash of images suddenly overwhelmed Jackson's mind. A battlefield, fire and chaos, strange alien creatures charging. And there it was, a silhouette, a figure standing by his side, commanding their forces. It was blurry, out of focus, but he could feel the connection, the sense of camaraderie that had been there. He had fought beside this alien. They had survived together, back when the war was still a burning nightmare. But the details were too hazy, too far out of reach. "No," Jackson muttered to himself. That was years ago. There's no way you're..." His voice faltered as the alien's face became clearer in his memories. It was that Drogian, one of the leaders, who had fought alongside them. But why would it come here now? Why had it waited so long? "You see it now, don't you?" The alien stepped forward, its presence dominating the small outpost. "I am the one you left behind. The one you thought was lost." Jackson's breath caught in his throat. The words felt like a punch to his gut, and suddenly everything clicked into place. The alien standing before him wasn't just an enemy from the war. It was a former ally, one who had been abandoned, left to perish when everything had fallen apart. The memories flooded back all at once. The betrayal, the final mission that had gone wrong. The Drogians had turned on them, using them as pawns in their larger war. Jackson had escaped, but many hadn't. This alien, his former comrade, had been one of them. But why was it here? Now? What did it want? Why are you here? Jackson asked again, the urgency rising in his voice. What do you want from us? The Drogian's eyes narrowed, its tone becoming more serious. I am here because of you, Jackson. You are the key. You always have been. Jackson's mind spun, trying to piece together the meaning behind those words. I don't understand, he admitted, frustration growing. What are you talking about? The alien took another step closer, its face growing even more serious. You think the war ended when you left. You think humanity was safe. But that was just the beginning. The true war, the war that was always meant to come, is just starting. Jackson's heart pounded in his chest. He felt the weight of the alien's words settle deep in his bones. The war they had thought was over wasn't finished at all. It was only beginning. And Jackson had been unknowingly tied to it all along. For the first time since this strange encounter began, Jackson felt a cold shiver run through him. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about something much bigger. And whatever this alien wanted, whatever message it had, was about to change everything. The war was far from over. It was about to evolve into something far more dangerous. And Jackson somehow was at the center of it all. The Drogian leaned in closer, its voice dropping to a whisper. You were the one who started it all. Now you'll be the one to finish it. Jackson's mind reeled as the alien's words echoed in his ears. The idea that he was somehow responsible for starting a war that had only just begun felt like a punch to the gut. He had fought for survival, but now, standing face to face with this Drogian, it seemed that his past actions, his decisions during the war, had set off a chain of events that he hadn't even realized. Finish it? Jackson repeated, his voice hoarse. What do you mean? I didn't start anything. I was just trying to survive. The Drogian's eyes gleamed with a mix of frustration and something deeper, something almost sad. You think it was just about survival? The war was never just about survival. It was about control. It was about the power that we all thought we could escape. Jackson shook his head, trying to push away the growing sense of dread. I don't understand. I was part of the fight against you, and now you're saying I was the one who started it? How? The alien took a deep breath, almost as if gathering its thoughts. You made a choice, Captain. A choice that should have stayed buried in the past, but it's time it came back to haunt you. The Drogians weren't always our enemies, but when you turned on us, we were forced to change. That shift, the one that made us what we are now, it happened because of you. Jackson's pulse quickened. What are you talking about? He demanded, stepping forward. I never betrayed you. We were all just trying to end the war. The Drogian's expression softened, though there was a bitter edge to it. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about trust. When the alliance fell apart, when your forces decided to leave us behind, that's when everything changed. You left us in the battlefield, thinking we wouldn't survive, but we did. We adapted. And now, we are stronger than you ever imagined. Jackson's chest tightened, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the weight of something much larger than himself. This wasn't about survival anymore. This wasn't just a fight for his life or the lives of his crew. This was about consequences of actions he had taken so many years ago. Actions that had shaped the course of history in ways he couldn't have understood at the time. But the war is over, Jackson protested, though his voice lacked the conviction it had once had. You lost. Humanity won. This isn't our fight anymore. The alien shook its head slowly, its gaze unyielding. You're wrong, Jackson. The war never really ended. You see, the war was never meant to be fought between just the humans and us. The real enemy, the one who has been manipulating both of us from the shadows, was always waiting. We were too focused on each other to notice. But now we've seen the bigger picture. Jackson's mind spun, trying to grasp the full magnitude of what the alien was saying. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice quieter now, as if the weight of the alien's words was finally starting to sink in. "Who's the real enemy?" The Drogian's eyes darkened. "The Zethrians." Jackson blinked, his heart stopping for a brief moment. The Zethrians. The name sent a shiver down his spine. The Zethrians were a race of aliens so far removed from the conflict between the humans and the Drogians that few even remembered their existence. They were like shadows in the galaxy, a mysterious species that operated from the edges of known space. Jackson had heard rumors, but they were just that, rumors. "They've been manipulating everything," the Drogian continued, its voice low, almost warning. "From the beginning, they've been pulling the strings, setting us up to destroy each other while they watched from the sidelines. They've been waiting for a time when we would be weak, divided, and now they think the moment has come." Jackson's mind raced. The Zethrians, if they had been orchestrating the entire war, using both the humans and Drogians as pawns, then everything he thought he knew about the galaxy, about the war, was wrong. The enemy they had all fought against wasn't the true threat. The Zethrians had been the ones pulling the strings the entire time. But why come to me now? Jackson asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "What do you want me to do about it?" The Drogian's expression hardened. "Because you're the only one who can stop them. You were part of the reason everything started. And now, you're part of the reason it will end. The war isn't over. The true fight is just beginning." Jackson stood in stunned silence, the weight of the Drogian's words sinking in. His past had led him to this moment, this confrontation, and now the fate of the galaxy seemed to rest on his shoulders. The Zethrians had been pulling the strings, but how could he possibly fight an enemy so elusive, so hidden? He didn't know the answers, but one thing was certain. This wasn't going to be a fight for just survival anymore. This was going to be a fight for the future of everything he knew. And Jackson had no choice but to take up arms again, even if it meant facing enemies he had never expected, enemies he could never have imagined. "All right," Jackson finally said, his voice steely with determination. "Tell me what I need to do." The Drogian's lips curled into a grim smile. "First, we stop the Zethrians. Then, we finish what we started." The silence that followed was suffocating. Jackson could feel the weight of the alien's words settling on his shoulders, the gravity of what lay ahead threatening to crush him. He had never thought his past would come back to haunt him in this way, an ancient enemy lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. As the Drogian stood before him, Jackson tried to steady his breath. The war, which he had thought was long behind him, had never truly ended. The Zethrians had been manipulating everything, pulling the strings from the sidelines, and now they were ready to unleash their final move. Jackson had been part of it, unknowingly, but now he had no choice but to fight again. And this time, the stakes were higher. "I'm listening," Jackson said, his voice firm despite the turmoil raging inside him. "What's the plan?" The Drogian's eyes glinted with a mixture of determination and regret. "We can't do this alone. We need to gather allies from all corners of the galaxy, people who have fought alongside us. People who remember what it was like before the Zethrians manipulated us into war. We need to remind them of the true enemy." Jackson nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of the task at hand. It wasn't just about survival anymore. This wasn't just about fighting for humanity's freedom. This was about uncovering the truth and stopping an unseen enemy that had been shaping the fate of the galaxy for far too long. "But how do we find them?" Jackson asked. The Zethrians are hidden. They've been careful. How do we even know where to look? The Drogian smiled faintly, a glimmer of something old and knowing in its gaze. I've already found one of them. Jackson's heart skipped a beat. One of the Zethrians? No, the Drogian answered. It's tone softer now. One of our own. A former ally, someone who has been watching them from the shadows. He's been trying to warn us, but no one listened. Where is he? Jackson demanded, urgency creeping into his voice. The idea of finding someone who had been watching the Zethrians from the shadows was a beacon of hope, but it also raised more questions. Who was this person? And why had they kept their distance for so long? He's on a distant planet, a place the Zethrians wouldn't dare to go, the Drogian explained. A place known only to a few, and one where the truth can't be hidden. It's a risky move, but it's the only lead we have. Jackson turned to his crew, who had been silently observing the conversation. His mind was already calculating the risks. The thought of going after an ally who had been hiding for years, someone who might hold the key to uncovering the Zethrians' plans, was both a lifeline and a dangerous gamble. But they had no choice. We'll need to gather a team, get supplies, and make sure we're prepared for anything, Jackson said, his voice steady now, the weight of leadership settling back on his shoulders. We can't afford to make any mistakes. The Drogian nodded, a look of approval in its eyes. You understand what's at stake. The Zethrians won't let us move freely. They'll do everything they can to stop us from uncovering the truth. But if we can find his ally, if we can prove the Zethrians' involvement, we'll have a chance to strike back. Jackson's gaze hardened. He had seen too many battles, too many close calls, to be naive. The road ahead would be dangerous, and there was no guarantee they would succeed. But he wasn't about to back down, not when the fate of the galaxy rested in his hands. Then let's move out, Jackson said, turning to his crew. Prepare the ship. We're heading to that planet, and we'll find this ally. We're not letting the Zethrians win. As his crew scattered to their stations, Jackson turned back to the Drogian. One last question. The Drogian raised an eyebrow, as if expecting more. Why didn't you come sooner? Jackson asked, his voice raw with a mixture of frustration and disbelief. Why wait all these years? The Drogian's face darkened, and for the first time, it seemed truly vulnerable. I couldn't. After the war, after everything that happened, I had to disappear. I had to make sure no one knew I was still alive. The Zethrians were always watching. If I'd made myself known, they would have killed me and anyone who helped me. Jackson saw the pain in the alien's eyes, a history of survival and betrayal that mirrored his own. It made him understand why the Drogian had waited, but it also made him realize that time was running out. We can't afford to wait anymore, Jackson said, his tone resolute. The time for hiding is over. We fight now. The Drogian nodded in agreement, its posture shifting to one of readiness. Then let's go. Together. With a final, determined look, Jackson turned and made his way to the ship, his heart pounding with the weight of what was to come. The galaxy was on the brink, and they had to move fast if they were to have any hope of stopping the Zethrians before it was too late. As the ship's engines roared to life and they lifted off from the outpost, Jackson's thoughts raced. They were about to embark on a dangerous mission, one that could uncover the truth and reveal the true face of the enemy that had been pulling the strings all along. But as the stars stretched out before them, Jackson knew this much for sure. There was no turning back now. The war was about to begin again, but this time it was going to be different. And Jackson would do whatever it took to make sure they won. The journey to the distant planet felt longer than it was. As the ship cut through the empty void of space, Jackson could feel the weight of the task ahead pressing on him more with every passing minute. His mind kept replaying the conversation, with the Drogian trying to make sense of everything. The Zethrians, an enemy he had never truly understood, were the ones pulling the strings all along. But now, he had to focus on the mission at hand. He couldn't afford to waste time with questions. There was too much at stake. Inside the ship, Jackson and his crew were preparing for the unknown. The Drogian stood by the ship's control panel, his posture tense, as if still not fully trusting this fragile alliance. Jackson didn't blame him. Trust between humans and Drogians had been hard to come by even before the war, and now that they were fighting the same enemy, it was a fragile thread they both had to cling to. "Captain," one of his officers called from the back of the ship, "we're approaching the planet's orbit. No signs of Zethrian activity so far, but I wouldn't count on it staying quiet for long." Jackson nodded, his grip tightening on the armrest of his chair. "Stay sharp, everyone. This planet isn't going to be an easy place to find what we need." The Drogian turned to Jackson, its eyes narrowing. "The planet is a safe haven at least for now. The Zethrians don't know about it. We've kept it hidden, but that won't last forever. We need to find our ally before they do." Jackson's jaw clenched. The weight of the mission seemed to grow heavier with every word. The idea of the Zethrians tracking them, of being discovered before they could even find this mysterious ally, sent a chill down his spine. The enemy they were up against wasn't just powerful, it was patient, always watching, always waiting for the right moment to strike. "We'll find him," Jackson said, his voice firm. "We don't have a choice. We have to." The ship descended toward the planet's surface, the landscape unfolding beneath them. It was a barren world, the kind that looked inhospitable at first glance. No thriving cities, no bustling colonies, just endless stretches of dusty plains and jagged mountains. The perfect hiding place for someone who needed to remain unseen. "Land in the outskirts," Jackson instructed, his eyes scanning the barren horizon. "We don't want to attract attention. We'll proceed on foot from here." The ship touched down with a soft thud, its landing gear sinking into the dry soil. Jackson took a deep breath and stood up. He could feel the weight of everyone's gaze on him, but he wasn't about to show any hesitation. Not now. Not when they were so close to finding the key to stopping the Zethrians. "We move out in 5 minutes," Jackson ordered. "Stay low, stay quiet, and remember, we're here to find someone, not start a fight." The crew members, mostly veterans of the war, nodded without a word. They knew the stakes. They knew that failure wasn't an option. The air outside was dry and thick with dust. The wind howled through the empty plains as they moved forward in silence, each step bringing them closer to the unknown. Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, something just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to pounce. He couldn't trust the Drogian's word that this place was safe. He had to be ready for anything. Team moved in a loose formation, weapons at the ready, scanning every shadow, every rock formation. The planet felt wrong, too quiet, too still. As they trekked through the arid landscape, Jackson couldn't help but feel like they were being led into a trap. But he pushed that thought aside. There was no turning back now. After several hours of trekking, they finally reached a secluded cave nestled between two massive cliffs. It was the kind of place someone would choose to hide, deep enough to stay hidden from any potential threats. The entrance was small, barely visible among the rocks. But the Drogian seemed certain this was the place. "This is it," the Drogian sighed, stepping forward with a sense of finality. "He's inside. You'll know him when you see him." Jackson exchanged a glance with his team. There was no turning back. They had come this far, and they had no choice but to trust the Drogian. As they moved deeper into the cave, the darkness seemed to close in around them, the silence pressing down harder with each step. At the far end of the cave, they finally saw him, a figure sitting cross-legged in the shadows, his face obscured by a hood. The air felt colder here, and Jackson's breath caught in his throat. This was the ally they had been searching for, the one who could finally give them the information they needed to expose the Zethrin as they approached. The figure slowly stood up, his movements deliberate and calm. The hooded figure raised his head, and for the first time in a long while, Jackson felt a sense of relief wash over him. It wasn't the relief of knowing the battle was over, it was the relief of finally finding a piece of the puzzle, of having someone who could help them take the next step. "You're Jackson," the man said, his voice deep and steady. "I've been expecting you." Jackson took a cautious step forward, his instincts telling him to stay alert. "And you are?" he asked, his voice firm but carrying a hint of curiosity. The figure smiled beneath his hood, his eyes glinting with a mixture of hope and something darker. "I'm the one who's going to help you stop the Zethrians. And I'm also the one who can show you what's really been happening." Jackson's pulse quickened. This was it, the key to everything. But as the figure stepped forward, something about the way he moved, something in the shadows, made Jackson feel like the danger was just beginning. "Are you ready to face the truth, Captain?" the man asked, his tone heavy with meaning. Jackson hesitated for only a moment before answering, "I have no choice." And with that, they stepped further into the cave, ready to uncover the secrets that would change everything they thought they knew. The deeper they ventured into the cave, the more the atmosphere seemed to shift. The air was thick with tension, and Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just walking into a hidden sanctuary. They were walking straight into a revelation, one that would change everything he thought he knew about the galaxy, the war, and even himself. The hooded figure led them with steady, purposeful steps, as if he had known this path for a lifetime. Jackson's crew followed closely behind, their faces tense, eyes darting to the shadows that stretched unnaturally along the cave walls. The deeper they went, the darker it became, until even the faint glow from the ship's landing lights outside seemed like a distant memory. There was something about this place, an unsettling quiet that didn't sit right with Jackson. It wasn't just the oppressive darkness. It was the feeling of being watched, of something moving just outside the edges of his vision. They finally reached a chamber, larger than any Jackson had expected, the walls adorned with strange symbols and alien markings he didn't recognize. The space was both eerie and strangely calming, as if this place had been untouched for centuries. But the one thing that caught his attention more than anything else was the central object in the middle of the room, a large stone pedestal, its surface etched with similar alien symbols. The hooded man stepped forward, placing his hand on the stone. "This is where it all began," he said quietly, as if speaking to himself more than to Jackson. "This is the heart of the truth you've been searching for." Jackson approached cautiously, his eyes scanning the symbols that seemed to pulse faintly. In the dim light, the entire room felt ancient, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "Something big. Who are you?" Jackson asked again, his voice steady but now filled with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "You said you've been waiting for me, but you never told me your name." The hooded figure turned slightly, his eyes gleaming with something unspoken. "Names don't matter anymore. What matters is what's hidden here, what you need to see." With a slow motion, the figure reached up and pulled back his hood, revealing his face to Jackson for the first time. For a split second, Jackson's heart stopped. The face before him wasn't the face of a stranger. It wasn't a human face, but it wasn't entirely alien either. There was a mix of human features, sharp eyes, a strong jawline, but they were marred by strange markings across his skin, like burn scars or tattoos, strange and unfamiliar. His hair was dark, almost black, but his eyes, the most striking feature, were a pale silver, cold and filled with knowledge. yet burdened by something Jackson couldn't place. "I'm someone who was once part of your world," the man said, his voice heavy. "I was a part of the war ... and a part of the truth. You'll understand soon enough." Jackson stared, trying to process the man's words. The truth? What truth? The figure stepped aside, motioning toward the pedestal. "The truth about the Zethrians, they are not what you think. They never were. And the war you fought, it was never about us." Jackson's mind raced. What did this man mean? The Zethrians had been the enemy. Everyone had known that. But now, standing in this alien chamber, it seemed like nothing was as clear-cut as he had once believed. He took a step toward the pedestal, drawn by the strange energy in the air. If the Zethrians aren't the enemy, then who is? The man's eyes met his, full of sorrow. The real enemy has always been the ones who made us fight, the ones who wanted to control everything. A cold shiver ran down Jackson's spine. Who? Who are you talking about? The man turned to face the pedestal again, his fingers tracing the symbols as if unlocking something in the stone itself. The ones who created the Zethrians, the Drogians, the humans. All of us. We were never meant to be separate. We were engineered. Jackson's breath caught in his throat. Engineered? What do you mean? The man's voice grew softer, almost haunted. The war was never meant to be won. It was designed to keep us divided, to keep us in conflict. The Zethrians didn't invade us, they were a creation, a weapon made by a higher power to manipulate the galaxy. Who created them? Who made all of this? Jackson's mind felt like it was unraveling. The figure's eyes locked with his. And for a moment, it seemed like the weight of all the galaxy's secrets rested in that gaze. The ones you call the Ancients, they were the true architects of this war. They've been manipulating everything for millennia. Every conflict, every war, every struggle, it was all part of their plan. Jackson couldn't speak. His head was spinning. The Zethrians, the Drogians, even humanity, it was all a grand design by an ancient race of beings who had long ago set this plan into motion. The war, the suffering, the alliances, everything was part of a cosmic game, a manipulation of civilizations for reasons unknown. But the war was real, Jackson finally said, his voice shaking with disbelief. I fought in it. People died. It wasn't just some game. The figure turned toward him, his face shadowed by the dim light of the chamber. Yes, the war was real, Jackson. People died. But they were never meant to be the ones who fought. The true battle has always been about control, about power. And the Zethrians were never the true threat. Jackson's mind raced as the pieces started to fall into place. So, if the Zethrians weren't the real threat, then what are we supposed to do now? How do we stop them? How do we stop the Ancients? The figure's eyes flickered with something close to regret. You don't stop them, you fight them. You take back what they stole from you, what they've stolen from all of us. The truth is the key, Jackson. If you want to end this, you'll have to make the hardest choice of all. Jackson felt a chill, as if something dark and dangerous loomed ahead. What choice? The man's voice dropped to a whisper. The truth has always been your enemy. Now it's your weapon. But it will cost you everything. As Jackson processed his words, he knew one thing for sure. The galaxy was not just in the midst of a war, it was caught in the middle of something far deeper, darker and more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. And the path ahead would demand more from him than anything he had ever faced before. The final battle was about to begin. The tension in the chamber was palpable, as though the air itself was holding its breath. Jackson stood frozen, trying to process the words that had just been spoken. The truth, as it was, had shattered everything he thought he knew about the universe, about the war, and about his own role in all of it. The idea that the Zethrians were not the true enemy, that they were nothing more than pawns in a game controlled by an ancient race, the ancients, was almost too much to comprehend. But Jackson knew one thing for certain: this wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. This was a battle for the very heart of the galaxy. "What choice?" Jackson repeated, his voice barely a whisper. He wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer, but he had no choice but to ask. The figure, who had once been a soldier in the war, someone who had hidden from the galaxy's cruel manipulations for so long, stepped forward, his face shadowed by the weight of his own knowledge. "The choice is simple, Captain. You can either expose the truth, risking everything, your life, the lives of your people, the future of humanity, or you can stay in the dark and allow the ancients to continue their control over us all." Jackson's mind raced as the gravity of the decision settled in his chest. Exposing the truth meant facing the entire galaxy. It meant revealing to everyone that the war, the bloodshed, the alliances and betrayals, all of it was a carefully orchestrated plan by a race of beings who had manipulated everything from the shadows. It meant standing against something much larger, much more powerful than anything he had ever faced, but staying in the dark. That meant accepting the status quo. It meant living a lie, allowing the ancients to continue their reign of control and manipulation, letting the galaxy spiral into chaos without any chance of breaking free. The figure's eyes locked with his. "You may have been part of the war, Jackson, but now you are part of something bigger. You hold the key to ending their grip on us. The ancients know you have the truth, and they'll do everything they can to stop you from sharing it." Jackson swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. The future of the galaxy rested in his hands, and yet he had never felt more unprepared. "How can I expose this truth? How do I fight them? I don't have an army. I don't have a fleet. I'm just one man." The man smiled faintly, almost as if he were remembering something long lost. "You are not alone, Jackson. The galaxy is filled with people who have been fighting in the shadows, people who've seen the signs. They've been waiting for someone to lead them. But it takes someone who knows what's at stake, someone who understands the cost of staying silent." Jackson's heart pounded. It was true. He wasn't alone. Over the years, humanity had built alliances, forged relationships with other species, and fought for survival. And while many of those alliances were fragile, they were all connected by a single truth: the galaxy was too big to be ruled by a single group. Too many had suffered. Too many had been manipulated by forces they didn't understand. "I don't know if I'm ready," Jackson said, his voice thick with doubt. "I don't know if I can do this." The figure placed a hand on Jackson's shoulder, his expression serious but filled with understanding. "None of us are ready. But we don't have a choice. We can either continue to live in the darkness they've placed us in, or we can step into the light and take back our future. The choice is yours, Captain. You're the one who has the power to change everything." Jackson stood still, his mind a whirlwind of uncertainty, but something inside him began to shift. He had fought wars before. He had led men into battle, taken lives to ensure humanity's survival. But this was different. This wasn't about winning a battle. This was about taking a stand against something that threatened the very fabric of the galaxy. This was about breaking free from the invisible chains that had kept them all in place. "I can't do it alone," Jackson said, his voice quieter now, but filled with resolve. "But I won't stand by and let them control us anymore. I'll find the others. I'll expose the truth." The figure nodded, his eyes filled with a silent approval. "You're not alone, Captain. We never were." As Jackson turned to leave the chamber, the weight of his decision settled in. The future of the galaxy was uncertain, and the path ahead was fraught with danger. But he knew one thing for sure: there was no turning back now. The Zethrians, the Drogians, and even humanity had all been manipulated by forces beyond their understanding. But now, with the truth in his hands, Jackson had the chance to end the cycle of control that had kept them all in the dark. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun, but this time they were going to fight on their terms. As he walked back toward the entrance of the cave, the cool wind of the barren planet outside hit his face, a reminder of the vastness of the galaxy and the many battles still to come. But Jackson didn't feel fear anymore. He felt purpose. And that purpose was to take back what the ancients had stolen from them all, to expose the truth, no matter the cost. The fight for the future of the galaxy had begun, and this time, the truth would be their weapon. And no ancient force, no hidden enemy could stop them from taking back their freedom.